Hello, everybody. This is Matt Morales. I'm the host of Columbia Alumni Radio, and we are here, episode 2, with Varun Gulati and Chris Yim of uClass, an exciting startup that they recently sold to a large Midwestern company called Renaissance Learning, and they're going to tell us today about their adventures and trials and tribulations of building that company, as well as we're going to dig into education, the education system, technology, big trends, really important things for society, and get their perspective on that. Welcome, Varun and Chris.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks for having
Thanks
us.
for having us.
So for the for the very few people of the world out there who don't know what uClass is, can you share a little bit about, just give the basic pitch of what the company is or was, and why you guys started it?
Sure, absolutely. So uClass in its final form actually went through a couple of iterations. It was actually originally called United Classrooms, and the mission, which we kept until the end, was we wanted to build bridges between classrooms around the world. And it started off primarily as a pen pal sharing service, but as we dug more and more deeper into that, what we saw was that we needed to have more of an academic component, and that's what we started doing. We focused a little more on projects and assignments and lesson sharing, and eventually we brought this to the district level and moved away from the teacher-to-teacher exchange. And it was during that time that districts told us, like, hey, your product is great, but what we really want is something where our teachers within our district can share with each other in free form. And so what we actually ended up creating at the very end was essentially a Dropbox for teachers, but it was specific for the K-12 industry. And what I mean by that is we had things like Common Core tagging. You could search for lesson packages together, which had formative assessments and worksheets and lesson plans. Everything was aligned to standards, and we made it really easy for teachers to share their existing curriculum in whatever format they had. And in addition to that, we had various levels of scoping. So if you wanted to look at lessons just within your school or just within your district, you could do that as well. And what made this really powerful is it really brought the notion of lesson sharing to a localized community, to your walled garden, as we called it. And in doing so, what we saw is that teachers were really engaging with the platform as a way to not only see what other teachers were doing, but also to host their own curriculum and their own assignments and their worksheets on the platform as well. And ultimately, our vision over here was that we would be able to not only have a lot of curriculum on our platform, but we would be able to inform teachers of what curriculum they should be providing their students based upon where their students are at. That's actually how we ended up how we ended up talking to Renaissance Learning, the company that ended up acquiring us. It was a conversation about bridging their data. They had a lot of assessment data. So they were able to say, your students are at this level. We wanted to take the information and say, all right, given that your students are on this level and that you have this content on your platform, why not teach this one thing tomorrow?
Interesting. And we kind of jumped into the platform and the product here, but just real quick, Varun, Chris, why don't you guys just sort of introduce yourselves and tell us about who you are and your background?
Yeah, sure. I can start. I am originally from the suburbs of Richmond, Virginia. I ended up going to Columbia, where I met Varun pretty much on my first day at Columbia at a pre-orientation program. We ended up living together our sophomore year with a few other buddies, one of whom became the CEO and another co-founder at uClass. After school, I went on to teach English in South Korea, moved back to New York, worked in a few different industries and jobs there, and while Varun did Teach for America in New Orleans and then left his teaching role to pursue a position at Google. Meanwhile, our friend and buddy Zach was a former teacher in Phoenix, Arizona, and then went on to teach at an international school in Tanzania. He came up with this idea to start connecting classrooms around around the world and wanted to first connect his classroom in Tanzania with the one that he had formerly taught in Phoenix, Arizona. And so he came back to the States having this vision to start this platform, and recruited me and Varun to come join him as he was moving the company out west to San Francisco. So me and Zach, we packed up his car, and I was living in New York at the time, working there. I quit my job, and we got in the car and drove cross country to San Francisco, where we started this accelerator called Hub Ventures. They're now known as Better Ventures. We teamed up with Varun, who quit his job at Google a month later and joined our team, and the rest has kind of been history.
And just real quick, Chris, when did you graduate from Columbia?
Yeah, so Varun and I both graduated in 2010. I was CC, Varun was C's, and Zach was 2008 from CC.
Cool.
Yep.
And Varun, tell us a little about how you got involved in this crazy venture here.
Sure, yeah. Chris gave you a little glimpse into that, but after graduating from Columbia, I went down to New Orleans and taught there for 2 years. I taught geometry to 10th graders. And then after that, I went over to the Bay Area, worked at Google in Mountain View. And it was in my 5th or 6th month at Google that Zach came out to San Francisco to talk to the accelerator, Hub Ventures. And he called me up and I was like, hey, man, can I stay with you? I said, sure. And so he crashed on my couch while he was interviewing at Hub Ventures. And that very weekend, he also said that he needed to put down the name of someone as his CTO for his company. Otherwise, he was worried that they might frown down upon his application. So I was like, sure, yeah, put my name down. We'll see what happens. We got into the accelerator, and that's when he was like, all right, is this for real? Are you committed? And I said, yeah, absolutely, I'm down. I believe in uClass. And that's how it ended up happening.
That's awesome. So it was really opportunistic for you, it sounds like. It's like, yeah, sure, I'll take a flyer. And then that thing became real.
Yeah, and at the time I was actually talking to 2 other tech companies, potentially about venturing. I mean, I'd missed coming to Google from the classroom. I missed education a lot. I missed the K-12, missed the teaching environment. So I was talking to 2 other education technology companies about joining their staff. But I think it ended up working out well that Zach and the timing of uClass was just perfect.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And so, it's one of the things I've wondered. There's been this flood of accelerators and seed capital and coming in, and it lowers the bar for people to be able to start a company. And I've wondered if that's good or not. If it just creates these people who are less serious. It sounds like for you guys, it both definitely lowered the bar, and you guys, if this opportunity wasn't there, you guys wouldn't have even started this thing. But regardless, it seems like it was a really good experience and outcome, and for you guys.
Are you asking if we're in a bubble? No, just kidding. Actually, no. I think the accelerator was a great thing for us. We would have done. I think if Zach came out to SF and said, "Hey, we want to make this company into a real thing," and we did not get into an accelerator, we would have still gone for it. But the accelerator did provide a number of things that really did help us at the point in time. At that point in time, because at that point we were operating as a .org. We were just connecting classrooms, kind of ad hoc. What we needed to do was we needed to make it into a business, and that's what the accelerator taught us how to do. Taught us about the business model canvas. Taught us about lean methodology. Taught us about fundraising. Taught us about Silicon Valley in general. Taught us how to build a team, how to maintain a team. And then at the very end of it, it connected us to a number of investors in the social impact space. And that, I think, what really, really meant a lot to us, and did what the purpose of it was. It accelerated us forward.
And let's talk about that for a second. Let's talk about accelerators, because I think it's interesting. I've heard this said that these accelerators are the new grad school. That that they provide this structure for people, to be able, who have ideas to create a business, and it's almost like school in a way where there's all these people who've like had very structured lives going, from, the kind of people who end up at Columbia, very often were doing, bazillions of activities in high school and whatnot. That definitely, when I went there, I definitely got that vibe. And then sort of the accelerator is like, once you leave school, there's a structured approach to entrepreneurship. What do you think of that idea? And what, if you think that's true, what do you think of that trend? And is that a positive thing beyond, just your guys' experience, but in general?
Yeah. So I think that one of the biggest challenges in starting a company is just really is in the beginning when you have this idea, and it may or not be a great idea, but you have many people have some reservations about completely diving into it and leaving whatever else they had behind. And I think that a lot of the times when you're committing to an accelerator, that's your decision to fully dive in and say, like, we're really going to go for this and try this thing. And so I think that just like grad school, where you probably have to quit your full-time job to enroll in a grad program, accelerators are similar in that way. You have to dive in and see what happens and make the most of your experience, because it's at least an opportunity cost while you're in the program. But I think that a lot of accelerators these days, they have a very structured or a somewhat structured curriculum. In our program, the first month we did a lot of customer development, where we talked to a bunch of teachers, school district administrators, and school administrators, just to understand more about the problem that we wanted to solve. The second month of the program was involved in product development, where we just we're laser focused on how to improve and develop the solution that we were building. And then the last month was focus on the pitch and then fundraising. And so for a lot of us who are first-time entrepreneurs going into these accelerators, this type of structure is incredibly useful. And then the accelerators often, at least the one that we were a part of, provided a lot of mentorship. So all of us came from the education field, and we're in the classroom. So when it came to things like wireframing or developing a pitch deck or just interviewing customers, we didn't really know how to do any of that. So that kind of education was super informative for our experience. And then coming out of the accelerator, I think that we took a lot of the insights that we captured and some of the structure that we were told were best practices. As you start a company, we followed through on and remained. We kept those things as part of our daily practices as we build our company.
That's awesome. Varun, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, it's interesting because if you look at a trend across grad programs in the U.S., you'll notice that there is this affinity these days to move towards hands-on learning, to experiential education, if you will. And the cool thing about accelerators is that you're learning by doing. You either succeed or you fail. You make a lot of mistakes along the way. You'll probably pivot 2 to 3 times, maybe more. But an accelerator is really pushing you into the deep end of the pool and saying, all right, here's what you should be doing. Here's how you can figure out your bearings. And that's the cool thing about it. So in some ways, I think it's a lot more high pressure than grad school, because you have to make do in a short amount of time. But you also get a lot more resources and support. You get a little bit of money. You have a network of people who have gone through the things that you have, and you're being guided along the way step by step. So it's pretty cool, and I think.
Yeah, and I know we're not trying to necessarily compare grad school to accelerators, but I think that when you're building a company and you have to learn super quickly. There's just a lot on the line, and I think whereas in school you don't get feedback as often. You take your exams at the end of the semester, or write papers intermittently, but you're constantly having to just figure it out, and you really can't sit back and let your learning happen passively. You have to kind of hunt down whatever it is that you're trying to achieve and do.
That's that's fascinating, and it's really interesting, Varun, to hear you compare this to sort of an experiential education, because I mean it's the ultimate experience, right? You know, you're building a business, you know, you're getting sort of taught, you know, while at the same time trying to you know get customers and do these things. Um, I love that idea. Um, but so let's go back to uClass a little bit. So you guys talked about connecting people in Tanzania and Phoenix. Uh, you guys did not start off as Dropbox for the classroom. You want to just, you know, for listeners who don't know, talk about how you guys started and how you guys ended up as this sort of like Dropbox for education model?
Yeah, sure. So I think that when we first started, we had this vision of um, connecting our students and making them global citizens of this of this universal classroom. And we didn't quite have, like Varun said, we didn't quite have a business model around that platform. And so when we came out to San Francisco to be a part of this accelerator, one of the things that the founders of the accelerator kept asking us is, how do we make what we have into a painkiller instead of a vitamin? And a painkiller is something that it's a must-have, whereas a vitamin is a nice-to-have. So that was the question we kept on grappling with. And so as we went out and talked to the teachers,
And just real quick,
sure.
to be clear, you guys started off as basically a pen pal service, or like an online pen pal network for students. Is that accurate?
Pretty much, but it had like a lot of your social network components to it. It had a news feed. You could interact with the other students in like in a world forum. We had a question of the day, had a project of the week, that sort of thing.
All right, Chris.
Yeah.
Sorry for interrupting. You can keep
No.
going, but I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah. So it was like a Facebook for classrooms essentially, and that was exactly the service, just connecting classrooms. And so when we came out here and started talking to teachers, we asked them, is global collaboration something that you're focused on in the classroom in your day to day? And many of the teachers are like, as much as we want our students to be global citizens of the world, that's not something that's at the forefront of our minds. There's this new federal state standards that are coming out, and we're really focused on aligning our curriculum to the Common Core, and so that's a big priority for us. And so as we started thinking about how we wanted to position ourselves as something that would alleviate a pain point for teachers, we started looking internally at our platform and noticing where we would see spurts of engagement, and we found that teachers and students were most actively engaged on our platform whenever we provided some sort of content for them to engage in. And so initially that started out as these monthly projects. So an example of a monthly project was in January we would have a Martin Luther King project where students, we called it the I Dream Project, where students would talk about a dream that they have for their local community or their neighborhood or the country, and they would submit these projects in the form of poems, pictures, videos, and so we saw that students and teachers were super excited about our content, and so we started shifting toward a model where we offered content on our site, and that became a focal point of teachers and students engaging on uClass. And so that eventually led to us coming out with a brand new iteration of our site, which was essentially a marketplace for teachers and school districts to purchase what we called assignments, and these would be bundled pieces of curriculum and instruction for teachers to administer to their students. And every assignment consisted of a summative assessment, a formative assessment, and a lesson plan. And so the big dream was to give teachers an opportunity to share their curriculum with other teachers around the states and around the world, and for them to make money for sharing their curriculum. And we ultimately wanted to make money from school districts who were interested in buying packages of curriculum for their teachers. And so we knew that in this model we weren't going to make a ton of money from teachers, primarily because teachers don't have, they're underpaid and they don't have that much money, and we knew that we needed to go after the district's pockets. And so that was a big challenge that we faced. Varun, do you want to touch on any of that?
No, I think you hit the nail on the head over there. So that was at that point our biggest problem was, I mean, how do you make money from teachers? First of all, we felt kind of weird doing that. I mean, charging teachers $1 per lesson when we know that they're operating on these like 30K, 40K salaries, that was kind of weird. So then we started approaching districts at that point and saying, all right, hey, I mean, districts, you guys are really the people who have the pockets, right? You get a budget for curriculum, so how about you put some of this budget towards the lessons that we're creating? And it was actually a good thing that we started talking to districts, because that's when we started opening the conversation as to like, how do we do this on a macro scale? What about this, like, what can you do with this marketplace to make it one step bigger? And it was through those conversations that we really started hearing the pain points that districts had with curriculum and lesson sharing and lesson exchanges for Common Core and for their district.
And we did so. I had the privilege of interviewing you guys a few months ago at a Columbia a physical in-person event, and it sounded, when you talked then, you guys mentioned that sort of along the way you guys were pretty broke and had a really hard time fundraising, and there was some. This wasn't the easiest of journeys for you guys. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. I mean, anytime you're starting a company, you make a lot of sacrifices early on. You don't get paid the typical salary you would. So, we were living off of small stipends until we were able to fundraise our seed round. And even when we fundraised our seed round, we didn't have exorbitant salaries, but we had to do things like Airbnb our rooms out in our apartment and crash in the same bed, as weird as that sounds, just to to pay our rent and keep this uClass dream going. So I think as first-time entrepreneurs, you just kind of have to get your hands dirty and figure out how you're gonna scrape by and keep the lights on, so you can keep on working at whatever your project you're doing until you figure it out and make it. So it's I don't think our situation or our story is that atypical, but I think we had a lot of hardships early on, and just in terms of, I think these are just learning experiences that every entrepreneur goes through. But I think that when things aren't working, you have to understand that pretty quickly and you move in another direction. And I think we were fortunate enough to be able to do that.
And we were pretty scrappy. No free lunches, unfortunately. We did have potlucks in the office. I mean, we did what we could to make the office a positive culture and a team environment. But we did also like try and save money where possible. We worked in a co-working space and we still are working in a co-working space and have been for the past 2.5 years. And it's more affordable, and it's kept us lean.
Yeah, I mean, why having separate beds for each individual founder? I mean, that's obviously a waste. Clearly inefficient.
Unnecessary.
Unnecessary. I mean, one queen size bed, you could fit 2, maybe 3 people on it.
Full size.
Yeah, I mean, why not? Well, that's awesome. So, you guys, one of the things you mentioned is you guys, saw yourselves as sort of like a social impact company. talk to me about Bill. I think there's a lot of people who see this trend toward entrepreneurship. It's exciting, but and they want to be a part of it, but they're not in it necessarily just for the big payday at the end. They want to change the world in some sort of positive way. And generally speaking, building a company, if you don't do something that someone likes, you won't. If you don't make something people want, you'll never go anywhere. But you guys had a very clear sort of a social mission. Can you talk about that? Building a social company, a social impact company. What's awesome about that? What's hard? What sort of lessons have you guys learned as a result? And would you build another? Is your next startup? Do you think that would be a social impact company?
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about that. So I think what it boils down to is we're all idealists at heart. When this company started, when uClass started, unitedclassrooms.org, it started with the mission in mind, and not anything related. We didn't even focus on the business aspect of it. And eventually, we realized that for this to sustain itself, what we needed to do was make it a double bottom line company, and that the term is used as one which has a social mission, which has we have impact metrics which we're hoping to maintain and deliver, and goals which we meet over there, and then we have, of course, our business value, and we have the metrics that we're hoping to meet and deliver over there as well. And it comes with its challenges. One is that you face a certain amount of skepticism from a variety of people. You have on one end of the spectrum those who are also working in social impact and nonprofits who don't believe that a double bottom line company is the way to go. And there may be some validity to that, but from our standpoint, we thought the best way to scale was if we focused on growing in the way a business would. Because the truth of the matter is that businesses do grow faster than nonprofits. We don't have to worry about fundraising as much as nonprofits do. We're less tied to certain measures and regulations. And the other portion of it where we face skepticism is from certain investors. In a couple of ways, actually. We are focused a little more in our seed round on getting investors who are specifically targeting impact companies. And that's because traditional investors, when they looked at a company, they would think, okay, this is interesting, but you guys are in education, and education, there's not a lot of money there. Are you guys really going to make money? And for us, what we told them was, yeah, we are, but we're also focusing on this other mission. We're really providing value in two different ways. Yes, we'll give your money back. You got your return. But also, on top of that, we're focusing on doing some good in the world, impacting the education industry. Chris, you want to add on to that?
Yeah, I think, I know during my time at Columbia, I spent my extracurricular time volunteering and being a part of after-school programs, and I decided to pursue those kinds of opportunities rather than being a part of, the finance club or even an entrepreneurship group. And that's probably because I didn't know that I wanted to be an entrepreneur at the time. But I think that as I graduated into the workforce, I knew, in my heart of hearts, that I wanted to do something that would, affect social cause or affect social change and be a part of, making the classroom better. Or I had volunteered in a number of after-school programs, so doing work that would eventually serve the kids that I used to work with at some point. And so I think that we had the unique opportunity to start a company that could impact the way students learned and change the outcomes that they would achieve. And so I think that for us, being able to start this company was sort of a dream come true. I think that if we wanted to make a ton of money, maybe we would have started out in finance or consulting or pursued some sort of other endeavor out after school. But we knew that we wanted to do something more with our lives, and making money along the way. That's just an added bonus. I think that going to school at Columbia, there's also this pressure to do and work a job that does well and that earns money. So I don't know. I think that we were able to kind of take out two birds with one stone And now we're working for Renaissance, which impacts millions of students. So it's pretty cool to be a part of a company that just has the type of skill that Renaissance has, and we're continuing to enjoy it.
Varun, you're making faces over there. It looks like you might have to get going.
I do have to leave pretty soon. Sorry.
No worries.
Can I just quickly point out, behind Varun, you'll see a picture of his grandmother and grandfather, who I believe were big influences on his life, and who have been a big source of inspiration for him. So let's give props to them.
Yeah, I was noticing that, along with all the other stacks of paper. Varun, what's the story with Grandma and Grandpa?
Well, before that, I do want to point out that right behind Chris, you see the American flag. His Virginia background has played a huge role in his life. I'm actually in my folks' place today, and this is my dad's office.
Oh, awesome. So one last thing, Varun, if you have time to take this. So you guys ended up selling to school districts.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as an entrepreneur, that sounds terrible. Just because I know that they're slow to decide, and fundamentally, the users of your product are the teachers, but the people who decide whether to buy your product are some sort of administrative bureaucrat type. Talk to us about how that, and I've heard other ed tech entrepreneurs sort of grumble and complain, some more loudly than others, about that. And it seems to me that in any industry where you have the user being separate, or where the user is a different person than the purchaser, there's danger there around what kind of products win. How do you see that? How do you think of that in respect to your experience?
Yeah, that's a very good question, Matt. And you're absolutely right. In these industries, like healthcare, for example, your users are more often than not, they're the patients, but the payers are the insurance companies and the folks who hold the pockets. Education is different too, because you are bound to a market of which has like RFPs and a bidding process, and you have to be on approved vendors list for states and districts, and sometimes even on even smaller level than that. And it becomes a process which is slow to move through. The average sales cycle in education is over a year long. And Chris can speak a little more to like what that process is like, but I will say that like it did cause a lot of headache for us, because from the outside you hear a lot of people saying like, oh, education is ripe for disruption. And that sounds fantastic, but how can a market be ripe for disruption when the disruption takes at least a year to adopt in just one district? And I try and scale that out where every district operates in their own independent fashion, making their own decisions, and you have thousands of those across the U.S. You need a sales force at that point, and a startup cannot afford a sales force. So we ended up doing was we started going for ways where we could, in essence, buck the system, right? We wanted to take some shortcuts. We went to first for the low-hanging fruit, which was the charter schools, people who did not have to abide by these big budgets, organizations which had partnerships with large regions. Like for example, one Tennessee is divided into these seven regions. We partnered with one of them and ended up taking a seventh of Tennessee as one of our users. Sorry, as a group of users. And then simultaneously we started focusing on some of the bigger districts, the ones which we knew had approval and deadlines for their budgets. So for example, one of the states that we were talking to, they got a grant and they needed to spend the money of that grant within the school year. That's good news for us as an education technology company, because that means we can focus on them and pitching our product as valuable and making an impact to students in their state. Chris, you want to talk a little more about that?
Yeah, I think I just want to echo some of what Varun has already mentioned, but I think that when teachers, they're thinking about how to improve instruction in their classroom, they're willing to take on risks and try whatever they can to improve the outcomes of their students. Whereas the people at the top, school and district administrators who are paying for the software, they realize that um, paying for the software is just the tip of the iceberg. They have to figure out how to train their teachers, get it in front of everyone, and then have them use it. And so that's where it was a big part of our responsibility to convey this customer success plan, to communicate to our customers what we saw success looking like, and to get their buy-in. Because at the end of the day, if school district administrators are putting their neck out on the line to say that this is worth spending tens of thousands of dollars for, at the end of the year they need to have results. And I think that a lot of the times they don't want to disrupt the status quo or the solutions that they already have in place, even if they're not working, because they know that they have to jump through a lot of hoops to get teachers on board. And so the people that we approached that we had a lot of success with were, like Varun said, charter schools who, we would voice or communicate this idea of customizing our software for them, even though it wasn't, even though often we're just tinkering with little changes, so that they would feel like they were molding the software as they were using it. And so we helped these initial early adopters to feel like they were big influences in the software that we're developing.
So you mentioned a phrase, like customer success plan, right? And that sounds like something from like the enterprise sales world, right? And but you guys are a bunch of teachers, essentially. I guess Varun, you're an engineer, you're a software engineer. Do you guys feel like your education prepared you for this experience of building the company? And based on this experience, do you look back and be like, man, I think that every college student or every Columbia student should have X? Do you guys feel like you're really prepared by your education for these experiences, or is there something that you would change if you could go back in time?
Yeah, for me, I would say there's a lot I would change. I wouldn't have hung out on the steps so much my senior year and skipped so many classes. But I mean, I don't know. I think that like when you become an entrepreneur, like there's just so many, you're just thrown so many curveballs that it's hard to say whether or not any class could have prepared you adequately for what you were going to do as an entrepreneur. But I think that developing the analytical, data-driven mindset that or the skill set you get from applying science or being an engineer, I think that's definitely useful, and really a big asset as you're going out to start a company. Because as much as you want to be emotional and impulsive and irrational about the decisions, which you often are in the startup setting, you have to be very you have to look to the data, you have to look at information, and allow that kind of rationale to take over and to determine the moves you're going to make. And I think that and you just have to be very realistic. I think that that's something that you gather, but I don't know, I think it's hard. I mean, we spent like $200,000 on our education, and I'm not sure, and I studied psychology in school, but I'm not sure if I can recall a single fact about psychology or say that I've used any of that.
But do the facts really matter versus the way of thinking? I guess that's, to me, like the facts. You can Google those, right? It's the critical analysis and thinking.
Sure.
I was just curious if you think that your education, you were well served in that regard.
Yeah, I think my quick tidbit is just I think that if you're smart enough, you're gonna develop the critical and analytical thinking wherever you're at, regardless of whether it's at like a small or a big state school or at an Ivy League institution. I think that for me, just like being able to be challenged and not intimidated by other smart people. I think being around a ton of that and a lot of intellectual forces at Columbia, I think that allowed me just to kind of have the confidence and the audacity you kind of need to have in Silicon Valley just to step up to the plate and speak out. Even if even if everything that's coming out of your mouth is just BS, at least you're doing with a bit of confidence. And I think you kind of learn that being at Columbia or being in New York.
There's a lot of truth in that. I'd echo that. I'd say that, I mean, as Columbia did set the foundation for a certain level of critical thinking. But I think Chris is right. It's more about like, if you're a smart enough person, you'll figure that out anyways. To Columbia's credit, though, they are investing more heavily in an entrepreneurship program. And I mean, this is something that has evolved over time. There have been more and more programs being added. There's a Columbia Startup Lab now, which is very cool. I wish that were around when I was in school. But I think Columbia, to its credit, has focused a lot on project-based learning, at least in C's. You have a Gateway, for example, is your very first class, and you work on a real project as basically a consultant as a freshman in college, and that's pretty cool. And so I think the cool part about it is Columbia is really doubling down on this idea that, like, hey, we'll have students learning through projects, we'll have students learning through experience, and if they're interested in doing entrepreneurship, we have these other resources on the side. We have a Columbia Venture Community, we have a Columbia Startup Lab, we have competitions for people who want to try out their own business plans, and that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and I think one thing that both Vern and I are good at are just seeking out people for their advice and for their help. And when you're starting a company, you need good mentorship. You need to learn off of the experience of other people. And so I think one thing, as just being a part of this, I know that I'd like to offer on my behalf, and I'm sure Vern will as well. But just if anyone wants to reach out to us as they're starting a business or seeking advice, we're also happy to help people along the way and pay it forward.
We've also gotten really good at optimizing Airbnb listings, so if anyone needs help with that, let us know too.
Well, so one of the I would point out, because I think I'd love to stick on this topic of education, the educational system, Columbia and otherwise. I think that a lot of times people look at education and they just think about what happens in the classroom, and they say, oh, well, you could get these learnings through Coursera, or you could self-study this stuff. But if I hear you guys correctly, Columbia, it seems like the biggest thing that Columbia did for you guys to build this company and sell it successfully, and it's not public, but I'm gonna guess you guys made a cool few million each, is put you guys together, right? I mean, this company is a product of the Columbia network. Not anything you learned in class per se, but literally, people that you knew, so, and that's a big deal. I mean, most people don't have friends, aren't working. I think, Chris, previously you told me you're working at Trader Joe's, when the company started. Most Trader Joe's employees don't have friends who are going to go start companies, move to Silicon Valley, one guy, recruit somebody from Google to be the lead engineer, and then raise venture capital and sell for millions of dollars. Talk about that, if you will. I don't know if it's something you guys have thought about, but I'd love to hear your reflections on that and how that plays in this kind of education discussion.
I think first off, Vern and I were both laughing because we didn't make millions of dollars each. We wish that had been the case.
This is an education company, Matt. I need to remind you of that.
And just to just give you a sense, we were nine or 10 employees when we sold our company. We'd been doing it, and our story is unusual. We'd been doing it for like 2.5, 3 years before we sold it. And but I think that to, I guess, answer your question, I mean, a lot of it's luck. I think that you have different types of entrepreneurs out there. Entrepreneurs who are cold-hearted and arrogant and but extremely brilliant and smart, and they're able to make their company succeed and also achieve success. I would like to think Varun and I are more warm individuals, and I think that we are fortunate enough to have I think first off a great friendship where we're just able to trust one another. And I think that when you go into business, you have to go into business with people that you trust. The last thing you want is to be grappling about small drama, or what he or she didn't get versus what they're owed. And what you should be focusing on is the company you're building, the problems at hand, the team members you're trying to recruit, and building the business. So I mean, it's not people that you can count on, that are smart enough, driven enough, determined, and that want to take the plunge in to start a company with. They're definitely not a dime a dozen. They're unicorns, and so and you have to be lucky. And I think depending on the type of personality you have, some people attract those types of people more easily than others.
And that's the biggest thing I think Columbia gave us. It was each other. It was the people who founded the company. And without that, I mean, uClass wouldn't exist.
Yeah, I think that's really powerful. That I think in this discussion about education and the changes in education and what the future of the university is going to be, I think the social network that is a place like Columbia or any university, I mean, there's few times in our lives where we are removed from our families and forced to live in, like shared living situations with strangers, for fixed periods of times, like in a dorm setting, So, and I think that's valuable. And if you take the class, if you just have the classroom experience without the social experience, it sounds like this company, wouldn't have existed. And I think that that's something that a lot of the policy discussion misses. When people talk about sort of disrupting higher education and these like MOOCs and online classrooms, and since you guys are all have been educators and worked in this space, I know your primary focus has been sort of like primary and high school education or K through 12, but can you talk about what you guys see think of these various trends around these online education? Is something like Columbia, like a dying breed? Is what does the future look like there? How do you guys and how does sort of technology play into that?
Sure. Higher education is a whole different ballgame than the game that we played, K-12. But I think fundamentally, I believe that you cannot replace a teacher. You can augment the capability of a teacher. You can augment the support the student receives, but ultimately, a teacher cannot be replaced. I think what we're seeing is like you have a lot of big institutions that are partnering with organizations like Udemy and Coursera to provide their courses online and for free, which is amazing actually, because it's democratizing learning for everyone. But at the end of the day, I fundamentally believe that most learning happens through two things. One is like the capability of a teacher to impart their knowledge, and two is experiential education. So I think the courses that will be the most effective are the ones where the teachers are effective in engaging their students, whether it be it online or be it in person, and the ones that provide real opportunities to practice the skills and the tools that you're learning. And I think there does exist a world where online education is more of a bridge for the classroom in person and a user, whether it's behind a computer or in that classroom. But I don't think we're there quite yet.
Chris, what do you think? Yeah, are these MOOCs and things like Coursera? Is there a little mini bubble in that? Are these going to replace universities somehow? Or
yeah, I think I want to echo a lot of Varun's sentiments. I think that one of the big hurdles with higher education is just how expensive it is, and you have people who are coming from lower socioeconomic backgrounds who just don't have the kind of opportunity or the kind of opportunity that Varun and I may have had to go to Columbia. So I think that because of that, as a result of that, I think there may be more of a push and a focus on online education and access to curriculum and instruction that is free and open. But I think that, like Varun said, the teacher is at the focal point of the classroom, and I'm hoping that, with technology that is continuing to improve the classroom experience, and there's a bunch of technology that is driven to help develop teachers, that I hope that the bar for instruction and just teacher training becomes better and better, so that regardless of whatever socioeconomic background you're a part of, you can get access to great instruction delivered to you by a teacher and someone who's a subject matter expert.
I mean, the one thing I'd say there, or my one response to that is, I hear you say that, but you said earlier, that the most valuable thing from your education was actually the connections you made. It seems like the knowledge, the instruction is being commoditized and democratized by all these online platforms, but the connections aren't. I don't know. That seems like a really profound point to me.
Yeah, I think. I mean, it's that experience and the connection. Those are very hard to isolate and to bottle up. I think that you ask 20 other different Columbia students, and they could have had very different experiences at Columbia. Vern and I went to our 5-year reunion recently, and I saw a bunch of faces that I had never seen before. I met a bunch of people I had never met before, and I asked them, like, what kind of friend group were you in college? And I remember one girl saying, like, yeah, I studied a lot. I didn't really get out that much. And maybe she had a great time at Columbia, but her, the connections that she came out with were very different and the experience that she had is very different from the one that I had. So I think, I don't know, it's hard to, I guess, prescribe how anyone get the most out of the connections available, and I think a lot of it just depends on your personality as well.
Yeah. So one sort of like, to start wrapping things up here, I did want to talk a little bit about the lessons you guys learned, around sort of building an education technology company as idealists, right? You guys are self-described idealists. You're not just in this to make a quick buck. And I know a lot, I think one of the I graduated from Columbia in 2008, and I think one of the defining sort of trends of the kind of millennial generation is this idealism, but also combined with, once you get out of the structured environment of a Teach for America, where to put this, how to turn this idealism into action. And you guys did it building a technology company for education. Now that you've been through a cycle, you've had this adventure, would you do it again? And what advice would you have for the next generation of idealists or other idealists who are out there who want to have some positive impact in the world? What wisdom would you have to pass down?
Sure, that's a good question. And Matt, I'm gonna have to leave after this. Yeah, to answer your question, I think idealism is something which you really need to hold on to, because the scary part of it is, like, throughout the course of our company, we definitely had moments where we had our idealism challenged. We on one of the first weeks of our company, the founder sat down and we came up with a list of values that we wanted to hold ourselves to. And Chris and I actually dug up that list recently and we went through it. And it's scary to think that, like, at times, like, if I were to be completely honest, we wavered on those values. And those are our ideals, right? So if you don't have those values sticking through your ideals, like, what do you have? But on the flip side of that, like, we tried our best and we stuck to, at least we had that. And I wonder, like, what if we didn't have that, right? So in terms of advice I'd give to other entrepreneurs, I think idealism is honestly, like, the best way to go. You're only on this earth for a short amount of time, and if you're gonna do it, and you want to make an impact, you might as well do it in an idealistic manner. might as well do it for a mission. And I've seen a lot of companies succeed in Silicon Valley that do have that idealism. You don't have to build the next Uber for blank in order to have a tech company. You could have a tech company that does meet your idealism as well as like satisfies your need for tech. I would absolutely do that again, and I think I would definitely build another social impact company again, and I hope to do it again with friends.
Yeah, I think much of the same for me. I think that.
Would you guys build another education technology company where you're selling to school districts?
So I think I remember you asking this question at the panel that we're a part of, and I initially said no. I'm not 100% certain whether or not that'll be our next venture, but I think that we had a very unique and telling experience, and I think that I think that there's we just have a lot of experience in this space, and I think that with that it may make sense to start another startup in the education space again. I think that the things that scare us away are just how hard and how bureaucratic the system it is, and not knowing whether or not we want to go through trying to figure out how to sell in education again.
Well, let's just wrap this thing up. So, thank you guys so much. We've been here talking with Chris Yim and Varun Gulati, the co-founders of uClass, which was acquired by Renaissance Learning earlier this year. Thank you guys so much for talking with us and sharing your story. It's been fantastic.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Matt.
Thanks, Matt. Really appreciate it.
All right, and thank you, everybody. This has been Matt Morales. This is episode 2 of Columbia Alumni Radio, columbiaradio.org. Thank you so much. If you're new to the show, most likely, we'd love to have you, tell a friend, share the show with anybody you know and think it's interested. Also, if you are interested in telling us about people you think we should interview, I'm going through my personal network here, which will run out at some point. So I look forward to recommendations from subscribers and listeners of interesting people. Not just in technology, not just in startups. That's my background. I've been an entrepreneur, but interesting people in any field. So if that's you, send me an email, matt@columbiaradio.org. Thank you so much.